Thank you, Richard. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. Obviously coming from somewhere different. As you can tell by my accent, it is not New Zealand. Please don't hold that against me. As Richard said, I've spent 30 years in this business. I've been lots of places, I've done lots of things in lots of countries. I'm glad that I'm in New Zealand because I truly think we're here to make a difference. And I want to speak to some of that tonight and why I truly think that we can. Speaking of my backyard, I grew up with it in my backyard. I grew up in Oklahoma. We have a producing oil well on our Capitol lawn. It's been there since I was a child. You cannot go up and down the streets of Oklahoma or East Texas without seeing, we call them nodding donkeys. It's a bean pumping unit, and it pumps this black gold out of the earth. Now, I grew up with it, and I'm very used to it. It's not something that I see a lot here. In fact, I was just telling some friends the other day, I drove from Wellington to New Plymouth the other day looking for all of this oil and gas infrastructure that we like to think that we have. And I didn't see a producing rig. I didn't see a nodding donkey. I didn't see a fracking unit. But I did see some tankers on the road carrying milk. See, in Texas, I would see them carrying oil coming from the East Texas oil fields, and they'd be going to our refinery, and that's how we create our wealth. Now, I'm not proposing that we're to that point yet. I don't think we are. But I do want to tell you a bit about what this government is doing. This is a first for me, working on the government side of the equation. I do work very closely with Minister Peralta's office, informally with Minister Bradley, and the agenda that government has for the oil and gas development in this country. I'm glad to be here. I truly think I can make a difference. And that's exactly what we want to do. But we're going to do it in a very responsible way. So what was the government agenda? It's very clearly the Petroleum Action Plan. That's been referred to in some previous addresses. This is something that Minister Bradley rolled out in 2009, and there's really 7 fundamental work streams. And at the first of this, the government is highly supportive of this industry. Yes, they are. We are interested in the pre-commercial a way in which we put data to industry. Our tax dollars go for funding Crown-funded acquisition, which we put to industry in a very supportive way. We've also looked inherently at our own capability, how we deliver what we do, what should the role of government be, and partly is how do we ensure that the right people get into our space. We also talk about royalty and taxation, and for the record, the effective government take in New Zealand is almost 44%. So it's not 5, it's not 20. We've got to think about government take. It's royalty and taxes. It's almost 44%, and that's something that is documented. And of course, we're talking now about what we're going to do with the Crown Minerals Act to make it a more robust and a more fit-for-purpose act for this industry. So why did I come to New Zealand? I think it's a bit by why I'm lobbying companies to come to our country to do the work in the way that I'd like to see them do. We know that we've got difficult geology. The previous speaker mentioned of the uncertain rocks in the Raukumara Basin. Well, that's true all over this country. Outside of Taranaki, and in some of our operators even say Taranaki is a frontier area. We've got difficult rocks. We're geographically disadvantaged, meaning that not every company wants to come to New Zealand. And we make some strong arguments about why they should come based on what we think the resource potential is. We know there's been a long history of oil and gas in this country. And today, in 2009, we produced about 19.6 million barrels of oil and 180 PJs of gas. Now that is not big by international standards. We are small, and we're likely going to be small. Now, we have 4 million people in this country that economic development from oil and gas will hope to support. In the past 4 years, we've seen some significant oil and gas fields, Porokura in 2006, Tui 2007, Mari 2009, and finally in Kupe. Just for the record, we collected $2.9 billion in value and represents New Zealand's 3rd largest export sector in 2008, behind only dairy and meat. And I would suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that this is fundamentally important to the lifestyle that we all want to live. I certainly want to live a very legitimate lifestyle that we can here and enjoy what we can use. And, you know, as driving across, you see the nice beaches, the fertile lands. None of that is going to change with oil and gas. Now, I'll just mention a bit about how blocks are put out. There's two different ways. There are bid rounds. The previous speaker mentioned a blocks offer. That is one way. The Raucumara Basin was a blocks offer. It does emphasize competition, and it gets the most robust work program on each block. And it allows for my team to define discrete blocks and put those up for international tendering. There's also something called the Priority and Time Award. As it turns out, most of the awards in this country in the last 5 years have been with Priority and Time Awards, which allows a company to essentially bid on an open piece of land. Both blocks offers and Priority and Time Awards are very vigorously assessed. This is not about allowing just anyone to come and do this business on our patch. And I want to emphasize the things that we look for in technical capability, including environmental awareness, environmental safeguards, environmental protections, financial capability. Can people who do come into this country, can they do what they say they're going to do in a financially responsible way? And finally, we look at the robustness of the work program. And that is very seriously assessed over why we would want them to come into the East Cape. What would they deliver? How would they deliver it? All of that is going to be very seriously reviewed before any permit would ever be awarded. Now, we do so in consultation with our local stakeholders. The previous speaker mentioned the lack of consultation on the East Cape. And the way in which we've done it, which there was a consultation process in respect of Raucumara. Unfortunately, the folks that we consulted didn't have any interest in consulting with us. So there was not an even dialogue on that. That is something that we want to change. And I know that the government has some very strong ideas on how we would like to do it. And it's about doing more of this kind of engagement. We don't have anything to hide. What we're doing, the work that we're doing right now, we want to ensure that the absolute best companies with the highest standards and the most robust work principles are the kinds of companies that are in New Zealand. I told Minister Parata the other day as we were discussing how this was going to be rolled out, and I said, Minister, we cannot afford to have a failure on our watch. And I was speaking specifically about the events in the Gulf of Mexico. That is my backyard. And I watched very painfully as I saw what was unfolding on my TV, as you did. And it was very painful for me. There were a lot of things that went wrong in that accident. I want to learn from that because I would never, ever want that to happen in New Zealand. Now, they had a moratorium for 6 months in the Gulf of Mexico. I reckon that it would be 6 years, if ever, had we had that kind of accident here. And for me, it's not about what we do and how we can clean it up and what kind of watercraft we can get on the water to clean it up. Let's make sure we never have it. And how do we do that? Well, one way, and that's been suggested tonight, is we have no oil and gas drilling. That is one option. The other is to do this business in a very safe and responsible way. And I'm very serious when I'm with you folks to think about what went wrong at Macondo. Let's learn from that. Let's bring that to New Zealand.